Welcome to this screencast on the introduction to Bootstrap. Last time we talked about what responsive web design is, and this time we'll be talking about Bootstrap, a framework that provides easy responsive websites. So what is Bootstrap? It's the most popular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript framework for developing responsive, mobile-first projects on the web. It provides some very nice templates for a grid system for laying out your website in columns and rows, and some additional things for typography, forms, buttons, tables, modal dialog boxes, drop-down nav bars, all sorts of other nice tools that help you build very pretty and responsive websites. Today for this screencast, we're going to talk about the grid system primarily, and how to actually set up your Bootstrap environment. So how do we, and oh, by the way, Bootstrap works on all modern browsers, from Internet Explorer through Opera, etc. More of the newer Internet Explorers, or Edge. To get Bootstrap, you can download it from getbootstrap.com, and then you get a zip file, or you can get the sources. There's several ways. If you go to getbootstrap.com, you can see how you can get it and install it on your machine. And you want to install the files where your web server can serve them up. The other way to get Bootstrap is to actually use a content delivery network, and you just add these links to your inside your HTML files, and it will download the CSS, which will style up the thing, and optionally you can put in a theme to color your Bootstrap items, and then you need jQuery for the Bootstrap JavaScript uses jQuery. We'll talk about jQuery later on in this course. And you also need to get the Bootstrap JavaScript to actually manipulate the Bootstrap items. So if you add these links to your HTML, you can then start using Bootstrap. So what a basic Bootstrap template is, an HTML document, and I'll go through it next. You can see that Bootstrap uses HTML5, so you have to have your doc type correct to be in HTML5. The header, you want to use language English for your HTML. In the header, you want to use the UTF-8 char set. Add the HTTP equiv so that we can use the Edge browser. And then the meta, the viewport, is very important when we're using mobile devices. This is going to set it so that our media queries work well, that we're setting the width of the screen to the size of the device. And the initial scale of 1, so we want it to be 1-to-1. So that's very important. Those 3 meta tags are very important. And they need to be in your head element, and they actually should be the first 3 elements. Then we have our title, and then we want to load in the CSS from the CDN. So we just use our 2 links. Again, optionally, we get a theme if we have one. That provides the default colors for the different kinds of things. And then we can have this HTML shim, which allows us to use HTML5 on Internet Explorer 8. Nice thing to have. Don't necessarily need it. I don't know how many people are using Internet Explorer 8 anymore, but that's a nice little thing to put in. And then in the body, we want to load our JavaScript, and we load the JavaScript at the bottom of the body so that the page will render quicker, because it will get through all those elements, and then we can spend our time loading in the JavaScript, because after the page is rendered, we can wait a few minutes before, or a few seconds, excuse me, for the actual JavaScript to load before we can have some dynamic stuff. Again, we need jQuery for the Bootstrap, so we need to load those 2 JavaScripts. And that's the basic template. Now, inside of Bootstrap, Bootstrap contains the things in a container. So it requires a container to contain all the elements that are in the website. And there are 2 basic containers that Bootstrap provides. A container, if you use the container class, It is a fixed width container that changes width based upon the size of the device, but it is a fixed width container. And the other is a container fluid, which uses a full width container, so it does a full width of this device. So I'll give you an example of that here by switching to my container example. So if we inspect the element by right mouse clicking, inspect element, we go to container, and you can see here that this container has a width of 1170 pixels. Now if I change the size of the thing, you can see that it will switch to 970 because we've switched our media query. And if I highlight this, you can see that the container has some margin, the orange margin, the padding, and then the actual content, and that width is the 970. If I expand it out a little more, you can see that the width has gotten wider. So this is the container class. If we go look at the container fluid class, it's got slightly different behavior. Let's take a look at this. You'll see there's no margin on the end. It goes the whole width of the screen. So there's no padding over here on this side and this side. And the width of this is auto, so it's the width of the screen. If we shrink it down, the same thing here. But if we go here, we can see there's padding on the left and right of the container because it's a fixed width. So as we expand this, container is a fixed width. The fluid, it's the whole width of the screen. So that's the difference between the container and the container fluid. The container fluid uses the whole width of the device, and the container itself is a fixed width depending on the device. So you see that we're now in this min width of 992. So that's a fairly large device. It's basically for a laptop. Here is less than, or between 768 and 992 is basically your tablets. Less than that is phone, and then there's actually one more. When we got the 1200, that's the next size. So we'll talk about that shortly. So the grid system provides 12 columns that you can use to lay out your content in your web page. And the columns are responsive. They rearrange themselves based upon the screen size. And so basically we're showing, again, we talked about this, if it's less than 768, we're talking basically phones, a very small device. And the size is called extra small, or for phones. Then there's small, which is between 768 and 991. That's basically a tablet, iPad, Android tablet. And then between 992 and 1200 is basically considering a laptop, smaller desktops. And then above 1200, you basically have your large desktops or your large monitors. So the grid system allows you to decide when the columns will go from laid out horizontally to being basically vertically on one top of each other. So let's talk about a very simple beginner's layout for websites. Basically, for your website, you want some number n rows of content. For each row, you want m columns of content. Now, you can have different columns in different rows, but it's still, you want m columns of content. And if the screen is too small, we basically want to go to a single column layout. So we go from a grid to just a single column. So basically you have two layouts in this system. You have your normal multi-column layout, or when you're on a small device or small screen, you go to a single column layout and you have to keep scrolling up and down. So that's a very simple layout, but it works very well with the Bootstrap. Provides very nice. So we want to implement this simple layout. So basically, you as the designer need to decide how big a screen you need for your multi-column layout. If you can fit it all in and you're extra small on your phone, use XS. If you say it's only for tablets can do it, then I can use my SM. If I think I need a laptop, I need those 992 pixels to lay it out, then use MD. Or I need tons of space, then use LG. So, but generally you're going to pick either small or medium. So, as to be the minimum width that you need to have multi-layout. So once you've chosen the multi-layout width, you then use the right class in your grid. So you have rows and columns. So you use the MDs if you chose MD. If you picked small, use the SMs, the smalls. So, and you keep them the same. So you pick MDs or SMs. And let me go back. And so when we go back to here, we choose it. I have an example here of the behavior again back here. So here's my grid example. So I have chosen these cells are using the extra small, the medium, and the large. And you can see there's column 1, so I have 12 columns across, 6 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns, 3 columns, 2 columns, because that's the call large LG6. Now as I shrink the size of the screen, you can see that this big screen, I do my multi-column, everything's good. I get to a certain point, and then the large goes to that single column stacked. It's all stacked. So, but depending on my layout, medium is still stacked, or still multi-column. At a certain point, medium goes, and then at small will go to single. Extra small does not stack ever. It's just compresses itself, compresses itself, compresses itself. So if you think you can fit that multi-column on a small phone, use extra small. So that's the example. That as the screen gets smaller, they stack. So they go from multi-column to single column. So that's how you choose what size you want to, where you want to use. Do you use large, medium, small, or extra small? And again, generally you're probably going to want to use small or medium, because extra small gets pretty small. And large, you're always going to be single column unless you're on the large display. So we use those. So 12 is the magic number. Your things must add up to 12. So in this example, I have a row with 2 columns that are equally spaced. They're both 6s, so it's half the screen, half the screen. Or I could do it where I have 2/3 of the screen, or 1/3 of the screen. Left is content. The right will be 2/3 of the screen, because it's 8. It does add to 12. So that is correct, and it will be responsive, and it will look nice, and it will stack to single column. Some incorrect is if I don't add up to 12, it's not going to lay out correctly because I need more columns. Or if I add up to more than 12, then this second column will actually wrap. There's not enough room for it to be in this row, so it will wrap, and it will be basically single column. Yeah, it will be a single column layout, even though I have 2. So you got to make sure that you add up these columns such that they add to 12, or you'll get some very strange layout behavior. Thank you very much for your attention.